Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I warmly welcome you all to our panel discussion tonight. It's an honor to serve as your moderator this evening and to guide through this really exciting evening. I'm Ibrahim Kaniža. I'm district councillor in Vienna. I'm also teacher and a political activist. And I hope we will have a nice evening. Before we proceed, I would like to take a moment to extend a special welcome to our special guests, Alvin Mehmedović, my colleagues from the Social Democratic Party, Muamer Janković from the Bosnian National Federation, Bedran Riba, member of Austrian Parliament, Amerisa Bajrić, she's a executive director from the Labour in the 11th district. So, and have a nice welcome. We gather here to discuss a significant topic, and I am confident that our estimated panelists will offer values, insight, and perspectives. I thank the Wiener Bildungsakademie and also our partners. They help us to organize that. And next, I would like to invite the chairman of the BÖ to the podium for a few remarks. Mr. Kabir Sokullu. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and dear friends, I'm very happy to be here today and to be able to welcome you today. In the name of the Bosnian-Herzegovinian youth in Austria, I'd like to thank our hosts today, not only for providing us this venue, but also for recognizing the urgent need to discuss today's topic. We are not merely here to introduce a book, but to shed light on a narrative that has been suppressed and misrepresented for too long. Without addressing these historic inaccuracies, true reconciliation cannot take place. Hikmet Karčić's book, Torture, Humiliate, Kill Inside the Bosnian Serb Camp System, is not just a historical account, but a testament to the resilience and strength of Bosnian people. It serves as a reminder of collective trauma that an entire generation endured and the importance of acknowledging and addressing this trauma. Hikmet's book highlights the systematic nature of the ethnic cleansing campaigns, the patterns of genocide, and the role of concentration camps in this dark chapter of history. The camps were not just places of confinement, but instruments of terror, where torture, sexual abuse, humiliation, and killing were used as tools to establish a quote-unquote Serbian living space. This pattern reveals that such incidents were not isolated but planned. It's not coincidence that the political and military elite of Republika Srpska from that time were convicted by the International Court of Justice in Den Haag. Beyond the pages of this book, the stories of real people like Ramiza Vurdić, a mother from Srebrenica who spoke at our annual Srebrenica memorial event in Vienna this year, bring to life the true gravity of these events. She lost 2 sons, a husband, and 32 family members. 32 members. This is an attempt of extermination. A heartbreaking account of witnessing unspeakable horrors, from the slaughter of a 10-year-old boy to the brutal killing of a pregnant woman, is a strong reminder of the human cost of war. Her pain, her loss, and her resilience are emblematic for the experiences of countless others. Yet, even as we remember and honor the past, we must also confront the present. Recent events like the nationalist propaganda film Srpska Struggle for Freedom, which denies the genocide and portrays the formation of Republika Srpska as a regular state-building process, show the attempt to rewrite history. Perpetuating false narratives only serve to deepen the divide and prevent healing. This is why we quoted Nietzsche in our email invitations. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. We must shatter these illusions, face the truth and begin the process of reconciliation. We must question the legitimacy of an autonomous region like Republika Srpska that was established through atrocities. Can it truly be legitimized in the spirit of human rights? Can hearts heal? The importance of events like today's book presentation cannot be overstated. They serve as a platform for truth, for remembrance, and for reconciliation. They remind us of the need for vigilance, for justice, and for a commitment to ensuring that such atrocities are never repeated. True reconciliation can only be achieved through honesty and truth. It's essentially to condemn the perpetrators, not an entire nation. By allowing these perpetrators to represent an entire nation, we inadvertently legitimize them and collectively bear responsibility for their actions. Bosnia has always been multicultural, and it should remain that way. Let's not allow fanatics to change that and always stand up against injustice. Thank you for being here with us today. Your presence is a testimony to the power of collective memory and the importance of bearing witness to history. Thank you.
Thank you, Kabir. So, dear guests, let applause and warmly welcome for Omar Al-Rawi, our member of Viennese Parliament. So, my dear guests, let me introduce our panelists for today. Dr. Hikmet Karčić, a German science scholar from the University of Sarajevo, and also our author. We will have a nice discussion. Next, Selma Jahić. She survived the genocide in Srebrenica, and you were born in Bratunac and now live in Vienna. And she writes and speaks a lot about the consequences of the time. So, Melina Borčak. Mr. Dennis Miskić. Political science in Vienna, is also a journalist with the focus of Western Balkans policies and nationalism. So let's start our conversation. Mr. Hikmet Karčić, I have many questions, but first question is a very personal question. What motivated you to write Culture Hamlet?
Well, firstly, hello. Firstly, just to greet everybody, good evening, and it's really a pleasure. I wasn't expecting so many people in Vienna tonight, so it's really, I mean, I don't get this many people in Sarajevo, so. How did I get into this topic? Well, firstly, I've been researching that issue of genocide and Holocaust in the Balkans for a long time. And when I was doing my MA thesis, I was working on missing persons. So I was focusing on court cases regarding missing persons or enforced disappearances during the war. And what I realized was that a large number of the people who went missing during the war, around 30,000, went missing from concentration camps. Then what I did is I went further to research the issue of concentration camps. Read a lot of books which were written by Bosnian scholars, but as you know, Bosnia is a post-communist transitional country, so most of our historians were not really genocide experts, but they were rather experts of the Roman Empire and then became genocide experts overnight. So most of the books that they wrote weren't that good, honestly. So that's one thing. Second thing is that there was a lot of denial about the camps. So a lot of the stuff that you could read online at that time denied that camps in Kiev existed. Denied, like the famous German journalist who wrote for the Living Marxism newspaper in 1997, which denied the issue of camps. And then you have many other examples as well. And I realized that the mass graves and the concentration camps actually create the core of the Bosnian genocide, because the focus was always on 1995 on Srebrenica, and that's a case for itself. However, the 1992 events were totally ignored. So I wanted to shed light on 1992 because that's when most of the Bosniaks were killed in 1992. So that was the main reason. The second reason is a personal feeling. My dad's family is from the Shigra. So I had my dad's uncle was actually a catch that was killed. His body is still not been retrieved. And secondly, my great-grandmother and my grandmother, they both survived World War II and 1992. So my great-grandmother, Hafiza Tabakovic, born in 1900, was a refugee in 1914. During World War I, then a refugee in 1943, and then a refugee in 1992. She died in Tetovo as a refugee in Macedonia. That's where she lived. So that's that history. So we have a case of, my family actually, my dad's family, rebuilding their houses and their whole entire life 3 times. So this was the personal aspect. Just in short, of course.
Thank you. Let's stay personal. Selma, can you briefly share your personal experience during the genocide?
Yes. So I was born in Srebrenica. I lived the whole time through 1992 to 1995 in the Srebrenica area. So my family consisted back in the day of myself, my mother, my little brother, my grandparents, and my great-grandfather. We were living in a house together. My father was actually started the war in 1992. He was he was working in Belgrade. I had other family members who were living in Belgrade, and cousins were born there. So and when the war started, my mother heard that my father was transferred to Russia to work there. His company sent him to Russia, close to Kazakhstan, to work there. And she thought it was a death sentence for him because war is brewing in Bosnia and Herzegovina. A week before war broke out in Bosnia, we were in Belgrade. As we returned, there were checkpoints inside our own country. Serbian military were asking why we were there, where we're going, what we are doing. My mother was scared. She said, "We are living here. We want to go to our home," and they told her she should look out and leave the area as soon as possible. So the first attacks around our village started, and my grandparents were scared, so they told us to go to Bratunac and try to leave Podrinje, this area, and move to Tuzla. We were not lucky. We stayed in Bratunac, I believe, 2 or 3 days, and the Serbian parliamentary seized Bratunac. They captured men, women, and hold them hostage and killed them. We were in the house of my uncle with his family, and during the night we heard shootings outside, and one of the neighbors came in the night and was standing at the door. My uncle opened the door, and this neighbor was crying. He was barefoot, standing in front of him, and he told us they were killing everyone. and he doesn't know what to do. My uncle let him inside, and we waited. Suddenly there was another knock on the door, and the Serbian soldier was standing there. He was a friend of my uncle's, and they were actually school comrades. They knew each other. So this soldier actually saved our lives back then. He took us outside of the house of my uncle. He moved us into a house, an unfinished house across the street from the house of my uncle. It was like just bricks and the first floor finished, no windows, nothing. So we and a couple of other neighbors were stuck inside this compound, middle in the night. You see, there was no lighting outside. The electricity was off. You could only hear shouting, screaming, gunfires everywhere. And suddenly, my little brother started crying and screaming inside his compound. My mother, totally scared, just put her hand over the mouth and nose of my brother, and he stopped screaming. My mother first thought she had killed him because she was so scared that the Serbian soldiers would found us. The soldier who hit us inside this compound started shooting around his house so that the other soldiers couldn't hear us, that we are there hidden. And we stayed there approximately 2 to 3 hours. And he told us to get outside and leave this area. He told us why he was shooting, because he was afraid that someone would find us in this house. And he told us that we should leave Bratanac. We should not follow the street. We should go over the hills, through the woods, towards Globova. This was the next area from Bratanac. And we should look and see how we can get out of this area, because everything will be under Serbian control. This was his words. They were taking everything. So the neighbors and we tried to make our way towards our village again, towards Globova as well. So we were walking mountains up high through the woods in pitch darkness, no light, nothing. There were over thorns everywhere. We were scratched constantly. We were barefoot, so we had no shoes on. We were in our pajamas when we were ready to go to sleep. So this was about 3 hour march towards Globova. It was in the morning when we reached Globova. Globova was burning. So we crossed the street, and you can just see fire everywhere. And just some animals, like cows and other animals, talk. You can hear them, but no people. So there was a street from Glogova which you had to cross to get closer to our village, where you have to go again uphill through the woods to get to our village. This was a long, long march. Somehow we made it. We made it to our village, and my grandparents were waiting there. They were shocked. They were screaming, "Why the hell are we back? What the hell are we doing here? Did they know? Have we heard that the Serbs are attacking the village also?" So we didn't even rest in our village. We moved from there to Pale and towards Srebrenica.
This was also 3 hours march. We were not able to use the normal streets, the normal routes. So we had to go all around mountains, hills, woods to get to safer areas. So through the whole war, from 1992 to 1995, my family, we moved from Srebrenica, the city, towards our village, through the mountains, through the woods, hid sometimes in the woods, hid sometimes in other villages. This was the normal life back then. So if we heard bombs were dropping somewhere, you move from this place to another. And if you're lucky, like we were with our village, my village was one of the last ones standing back then. So when Srebrenica was captured by Serbian forces in 1995, my village was also seized. So this was game over for us back then. The last days in Srebrenica were horrendous. I remember we were one of the last ones to got to Potocari. I have lost during the war from 1992 to 1995 many family members. My great-grandfather was killed at the beginning of the first major attack on our village in 1992. He died in a cellar because a mortar cut his leg, and he bled to death inside of the compound where he was hidden. Later on, uncles of mine also were killed in the woods somewhere because where they were chopping wood and they attacked them. Other neighbors were kidnapped and brought to concentration camps, later on released, for them to tell us what was happening in the concentration camps, to make us fear Serbs more. It was like a mind game for them. Sometimes they would just shoot randomly around you when you are playing as a child outside, just for you to be afraid. Just fun for them, to make you afraid. At last day in Srebrenica, in Potocari, my mother and my brother and I, we were in our village again. Suddenly, one of the soldiers, our soldiers, was running towards us, and he was screaming at my mother, what the hell she's doing inside of the village. Didn't she know, didn't she hear that Srebrenica was falling? That Srebrenica was in Serbian hands. And she just grabbed my brother and me, she packed something to eat a little bit, and we made ourselves on the way to Srebrenica. It was, like I said, around 3 hours to Potocari, if you have to go by foot from my village through this road that we had to take back in the day. And when we arrived in Potocari, people everywhere. Just, I can't imagine today to see this many people in Potocari. All of my family members were there, and we were waiting. We didn't know what was going to happen. No one knew. There were shellings inside of the city, so people were running for their lives. You can see shellings all around the city, where the woods were, etc. And we were trying to gather as many family members together as possible so we can share information and see how everyone is doing. So at the end, we left Srebrenica on the 12th of July, my grandparents on the 13th of July. We were one of the first who left. There was also one of my uncles who has a mental disability who was also there. He was first in, I believe, in a facility from a Red Cross organization who were responsible to take care of people who were not able to take care of themselves. I've tried so hard to find out which organization this was. I know exactly where the location was, in Potocari. But to this day, no one can answer what kind of organization they were. We have no knowledge about them. I asked even in Memorial Center if they have any information. No one has any information about them. Because, why I want to find them? Because they have a list of people who were not able to take care of themselves. This organization was responsible to take care of themselves until the end. They didn't do that. They didn't take. They misguided their responsibility. They let them go. People, elderly who couldn't walk, who were mental, not able to take care of themselves, they were let go and into Serbian hands, who were killed, like my uncle. And to this day, nobody knows which organization that was. No details, nothing.
Thank you for your personal experience. The personal narratives are deeply moving. Melina Borčak, as an author, filmmaker, I'm eager to hear your perspective. What inspired you to focus in your work on anti-Muslim racism, genocide?
Yeah, is this working? Yeah, okay. I think I didn't choose my work chose me. I know it's a cliche, but I was basically born into the genocide. I'm from Foča, so it's like the hospital I was born in later on was used for horrible, horrible things. So when I was living in Bosnia, because I moved to Germany like 8 years ago, but when I was living in Bosnia, I was like, well, there's people like Hikmet, they're doing the job, I can relax. And then I got to Germany and nobody knew, like, not nobody, but you know what I mean. Like, most people didn't know anything about the genocide. So I had to start doing something. I had to start working on it. And I'm a journalist, so that's the way I did it. And I noticed there's like 3 ways in which the genocide is dealt with. One is denial and just like spreading lies. We don't need to get into that. We all know that's a whole topic in and of itself. Then there's just ignoring it, just pretending that it never happened, not making it a part of collective European culture of remembrance. And then the third thing is the thing that, you know, respected journalists do, the people that think that they are on the right side of history. And what they do is reduction and depolitization. So they reduce the entire Bosnian genocide to a few days in July. They wouldn't talk about what you experienced in 92, what your grandfather, how he was killed in 1992, how there was a giant famine and a lot of people were dying of hunger in Srebrenica, how Srebrenica was under siege, how there were massacres before 95. And all of this is what they forget about Srebrenica. Plus, they completely forget about Prijedor, about Foča, Višegrad, and so on, Bijeljina, Doboj, and so on. So that's, whoopsie. So that's the first thing. It's reduced, and this is very convenient because then we can pretend, oh, you know, those crazy Balkan people, they are all so nationalist. They just started killing each other, and it was kind of the same. They were killing each other on the same level. And right at the end, in 95, the Serbs did a little bit more in Srebrenica, but otherwise it's all the same, which of course isn't true. And then the second thing, and this is a giant problem, like sometimes I write articles about Prijedor, about Sarajevo, and so on, and then the editors want to put a picture of Srebrenica about an article for Prijedor. And then I complain, and then they're like, well, that's the only thing people recognize. Well, why is that the only thing people recognize? Maybe because you're incompetent. So that's the first thing. The second thing is depoliticization. So even when they report about it, I don't know how the situation is in Austria, but in Germany, you could basically read every article about the genocide. And in 99% of those articles, the only infos you would have would be, oh, it was so horrible, the mothers are crying. You wouldn't know the name of the ideology, the name of the political party who did this, the names of any of the war criminals except maybe Mladic. It's insane. But yeah, I'm gonna stop.
Thank you. Dennis Miskić, what drove you to professionally engage with the topic of genocide?
So Melina mentioned when she came to Germany, most people didn't know about anything that happened in Bosnia. I was most people. I am born in Austria. I went to school in Austria, and it took me 19 years to find out that my mom was born in an eastern Bosnian town that was known for very notorious rape camps during the war. It took me also 19 years to find out that my dad is from a town and that I spent every summer as a kid in a city that was under siege for more than 3.5 years. And I know I didn't learn in school, it was by coincidence. So, and it took me a few more coincidences to get involved with the Memorial Center. And when you go down there, I mean, go and spend a month in Srebrenica, or go and spend a month in Bratunac. And you will see, I mean, what you will see is what I saw first was a lot of injustice. And I tell you, it's not a nice feeling, you know, to stop at a traffic light and see a picture of a convicted war criminal that's, you know, them celebrating his birthday. I mean, come on, what is this? And so this is probably a very brief answer to, or the start of, you know, why I got involved in this. And then, you know, I mean, you just listen to, you know, Selma telling you about her experience, and it's exactly that, you know, go down there, you listen to what the mothers of Srebrenica had to live through, not just during the war, during the genocide, but for the past 30 years. I mean, and these are stories that will stick to you. Go and visit the places that people were executed. I mean, the next days, I will tell you, I promise, the next days you go to sleep, those pictures, they will stick with you. And this is, I think, something that we still have to work on, you know, to get people to actually visit the place. I don't take the excuse that, you know, Srebrenica is 2.5 or 3 hours away from Sarajevo with the car. I'm not taking that excuse as an excuse anymore. It's not, you know. And also people who come to the Memorial Center to visit for 2 hours, have lunch, and then they go back because, you know, I don't want to spend the night in Bratunac. It's uncomfortable, you know, I want to sleep there. Well, what are the people who are working at the Memorial Center doing every day, you know? And this is just, you know, very few things that you will notice very quickly when you go down there. And yeah, I will stop here as well, but, you know, this is what drives me still.
Thank you. You talked about the injustice and the reflection to the society there. We will talk about that later. I will make the next question to Hikmet Karčić. You speak many times and you mentioned the termini Bosnian genocide in your book. Even though only the Srebrenica genocide has been confirmed by International Criminal Court. Should we speak about the Srebrenica genocide or about Bosnian genocide?
That's one of my favorite questions. Of course, Bosnian genocide, and I'm proud that I was, let's say, one of the first people to be using it at a time when even Bosnian editors were erasing this back in 2010. Firstly, yes, legally, the ICTY found evidence that only genocide was committed in Srebrenica. But I remind you that the role of the International Criminal Tribunal was not to establish truth, but rather to establish criminal responsibility for individuals. So that's the first thing any lawyer should know. Secondly, even if we look at it from a legal point of view, there are 4 judgments in Germany which have found that genocide was committed in Kotor Varoš, in Kalesja, Foča, and
also in East Bosnia, sorry.
The whole of Bosnia. So these are all towns throughout Bosnia. So these are German courts which found this back in 96, 97, 98. So even from a legal point of view, that's incorrect. Second, then the third thing is that linguistically, do you say the genocide in Kigali or the genocide in Cambodia, or do you say the Rwandan genocide? I don't see why we should narrow ourselves down to Srebrenica, because when the Serb perpetrators entered Srebrenica, they didn't ask people, "Are you from Srebrenica?" They told the men, "Pull down your pants to see if you're circumcised." Circumcision was, for the males, their identity card. I'm sorry for being too blunt, but this was reality. So if you were a Bosniak from Vienna and you happened to be in Srebrenica in Potečari in 1995, you would also be in a mass grave today. So that's the point with genocide. This wasn't a genocide committed against Srebrenica people or people from Srebrenica, from Bratunac, or anybody else. This was a genocide committed against Bosniak people in Eastern Bosnia. So from that point of view, if you look at the Srebrenica genocide, the most number of people killed in Srebrenica were not from Srebrenica, they were from Bratunac. So if you want to look from that point of view, we should call it the Bratunac genocide, right? Because most people killed there. Nevertheless, the point of the Srebrenica genocide in July 1995 was to get rid of all Bosniak males from Eastern Bosnia who were concentrated around the enclave of Srebrenica, with the aims so that these people would never regenerate afterwards, biologically. Demographics was something which the Serb nationalist politicians were obsessed with. They were obsessed with demographics. They talk about this today. Those of you who monitor these far-right groups and so on, you can hear about the Great Replacement narrative.
Our land for all people.
Well, the Great Replacement narrative was very active among Serb nationalists in 1991. So they made predictions, which I mentioned in my book, about how many Bosniaks are going to live in Bosnia, or Bosnian Muslims are going to live in Bosnia in 2021. So they commissioned experts who work at the universities to make statistical maps of how many Bosniaks are going to live in Bosnia in 2021. So they were obsessed with demographics. That's why they wanted to get rid of Bosniaks all over Bosnia. So that's why I always use the term Bosnian genocide. Firstly, it makes it easier when you talk about genocide, Holocaust, Armenian genocide, Cambodian genocide, Rwandan genocide, the Yazidi genocide, and so on. And then you have the Bosnian genocide. You don't narrow yourself down to 4 days in Potečari in 1995. So that's the key issue. I think I gave enough reasons why we should call it Bosnian genocide.
Thank you, Melina.
For me, that's the most important thing, because Bosniaks have been oppressed so long and put down so long, that now we have this tendency to self-oppress and to kind of make ourselves smaller and to make what was done to us smaller. But we should be just correct, just stick to the facts. Why do we need to wait for the ICTY or for some UN tribunal to say this was genocide when even the Holocaust was never confirmed by an international court to be a genocide? There's only 3 genocides in the history of the entire human race that were confirmed by international courts to be genocide. It was the Bosnian genocide, the Rwanda genocide, and Cambodia. That's all, nothing else. So we should basically be going around denying every genocide ever except our own, if that's the logic. But the UN tribunal said, okay, genocide happened in Srebrenica. They said the genocidal acts happened in Prijedor, but they couldn't establish that there was an intent to do this, which is insane if you look at it, because people didn't stumble and just fall into a concentration camp. Of course, it was intentional, but this is the thing, because like Hikmet said in the beginning, most of the genocide happened in '92. And then you had 3.5 more years of Serb nationalists ruling over those places. So of course, they destroyed a bunch of evidence in Prijedor. Like the Srebrenica conviction we got because Karadzic basically copy-pasted out of the genocide, out of the UN Genocide Convention, create circumstances which make it impossible to survive. That's like copy-paste from the UN Genocide Convention. Of course, that made a conviction. But if you destroy all evidence, they had like 3.5 years to destroy evidence in Prijedor, in Foča, in Visegrad, and now we're pretending Visegrad isn't a genocide because it doesn't meet standards that not even the Holocaust meets. I mean, this is insane. The genocide in Bosnia was the first time that in an international court even optužio, kako se kaže? Indicted, yeah. It's the first time in human history that an international court even indicted someone for genocide. Like, that's a huge win. And the fact that the Srebrenica genocide is like recognized by the ICTY, plus Doboj was the first ever genocide conviction in Germany. Everybody's talking about remembrance culture in Germany. They never said the Holocaust was a genocide, but they said Doboj was a genocide. And the guy who committed it was sentenced to life and then died in his cell in 2014. And it was a beautiful story. We should know about it, because like we can be happy when we remember him. Krepavat.
Can I just say one more?
The next question goes also to you, but
yeah, very briefly. I want to add on something important that Melina said in the beginning, and then also Hikmet. This is something that the director of the Memorial Center and the Memorial Center is working on, because I'm aware, and also a lot of people here maybe haven't read a lot about the genocide in Bosnia. But think about this. Do you think the genocidal intent was created out of a vacuum on the 10th of July, was there for a few days, and went back into that vacuum at the end of July? This is a long process that started before the war and has endured even after the war. And also, if you look at the war and you look at Srebrenica, you cannot understand what happened in July 1995 in Srebrenica without understanding the concentration camps, the rape camps, without understanding the siege of Sarajevo, what happened in Visegrad. So this is just very briefly what I wanted to add.
thank you. The next question goes to you, and you spoke about injustice and the effect of the local community there. And also about that many politicians denied the genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, formerly Republika Srpska. How does it affect? Is the genocide still going on, or is it over? How would you describe that?
Well, some people and Hikmet, as a genocide researcher, I hope he will correct me on this if I'm wrong. But we have a lot of people saying, we're in the 10th stage of the genocide, which is denial. But I talked to you about the injustice, and if you look at some of the recent stuff that has been going on in the areas where Bosniak returnees are being beat up, their houses vandalized, daily death threats for people who are advocating for these kind of topics or who dare to say something about it publicly. I mean, there are some people, and I agree very much that, this is maybe even, the start for a new genocide where you identify, that starts with othering, you identify the other group where you say, okay, these are the Bosniaks, the bad people, we don't want them here, you are not welcome here, and they make it very clear that the Bosniaks in the RS, in the Republika Srpska entity, they are not welcome. I mean,
thank you. Selma, what would you say? You have family there. How do your family live there, and what are their stories, their feelings?
I have a personal story from one of my cousins there who recently was employed in a fabric close to Srebrenica, who was working on metals, tin. And in this factory, until recently, non-Bosniaks were only employed. So this was systematically oppressing Bosniaks there in this area, not getting employed. The high-paying jobs were not for them. If they want to work in the police force, and everything is all harder for them to get in there. So every public job is not for Bosniaks. They will oppress them until the end. I have family members who are trying to make a living there. It's not because they want to live there, because they are not able to survive anywhere else. This was the only place they could return to. So they're making the best out of everything that they have there. When I'm there on my own with my parents, I'm more quiet. I'm not outspoken there because my actions there are consequences for my family. So when I go there and say anything about Republika Srpska and Dodik is this and Dodik is that loud in the public, they all know who are my family members. So they have to pay the price for my actions there. So I'm more laid back in my words. Don't talk publicly, only inside the safety of the house of my cousins when we talk about politics, because I know what can happen to them if they hear there's someone from the diaspora making noise there and attacking the Republika Srpska, and this is your family members, and we will take revenge or anything. So it's hard. It's hard, but they're trying. They're trying daily to live there, a peaceful life, but it's hard.
Thank you. Hikmet Karčić, you talked in your first answer about your motivation, and you also talked about the locating of graves, the exhumation from victims. We hear a lot and also read and write a lot about this politics of denial, of glorification. We also have the message from Brčko 2 or 3 weeks ago that a doctor has a grave in his backyard. And what is the motivation? What motivates people to do something? Is this a policy? You talked in your book about the SANU memorandum. Could you explain that a little bit for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, to start off, the SANU memorandum, which was by the Serbian Academy of Arts and Sciences from 1986, it was mainly focused, it was a top secret document which was mainly focused on the political events at that time in Kosovo, which were going on. So that's something we need to put out clearly. The Yugoslav regime was firstly interested in dealing with Kosovo. Bosnia came later on. I'm saying this intentionally because look what is happening in Kosovo a few days ago. After the Bosnian genocide and after the end of all the Balkan Yugoslav wars, a few years ago, the Serbian Academy of Arts and Sciences brought another memorandum number 2, which focuses a lot, again, top secret document which was leaked, which focuses a lot on the destabilization and destruction of Bosnia and Herzegovina from within, which says you need to deny the Bosnian language, you need to deny the Bosniak identity, you need to destroy state institutions. The aim of Serb nationalists in Bosnia and in Serbia is to show that Bosnia and Herzegovina is a dysfunctional state which cannot exist, which cannot coexist, which is polarized, and which needs to be dismantled. That's the whole idea behind it. That is why you have such a large increase in genocide denial and glorification. Again, looking at these politicians who and people who deny the genocide and who glorify the crimes. You had a case back in 2005, 6, 7 when things seemed to be quite good in Bosnia. At the time I was in high school, things were very well. Dragan Čavić, at the time he was the president of Republika Srpska, he was forced by the international community to recognize that genocide occurred in Srebrenica. So there was this really positive wave of events going on. However, 2006 was a turning point for many reasons, which I won't go into right now, but maybe later on we can go into our discussion, which started the polarization of society in Bosnia. And so it started slowly, and it reached its peak in 2017, 2018, when genocide denial and glorification took a whole entire mainstream in the societies, both in Serbia and in the Bosnian Serb Republic. This mainstreaming of genocide denial and triumphalism, or the glorification of war crimes, meant that each and every person who had an opinion about genocide could publicly state it, and without consequences. So you could go out right now and say, that woman who says that she's raped, she's lying, and no consequences. You can go out and say, in Potocari, there are no human bones, it's all animal bones. Again, no consequences. So this was a deep radicalization, which we have since 2017, 2018, at this time. So right now it has become actually really cool to deny genocide. So you have people who are singers, who are actors, who are, ordinary punkers, rockers, anywhere, whatever, not you, Melina, who are finding it very, very cool to deny, because that's something to be part of. You know, it's something it's in right now to deny these crimes. And the latest event which you mentioned was an event of a doctor from Brčko who actually collected a body, a skeleton from around Srebrenica in 1997, conducted some sort of analysis or experiments on it, and then tried to get rid of it by cementing it in his backyard as a part of a water fountain. So he had a water fountain and there was a body underneath. To be on the record, and this is something which you really need to put it out there, he was, the police was informed about this by his wife and sons. So they didn't know about this. Once they did find out, because he threatened he threatened them, saying that they will end up like the man in the water fountain. That's when they realized that something could be there. And so they were the ones, and this was again an isolated event, as far as I know, so far. But just to go back with the mass graves and so on, the first elements of denying the genocide started back in 1995. In September 1995, Ratko Mladić signs an order stating that bodies need to be removed from mass graves. This was an event which started the mass removal of bodies from primary mass graves into secondary, tertiary, and other mass graves. The aim of this was to dislocate bodies as far away as possible and to dismember skeletons as much as possible. So that's why right now you have the cases that in Srebrenica Memorial, not a single body or a few bodies are complete. Mainly you have 3, 4, 5 skeleton remains, and you have probably dozens and dozens of other small secondary graves scattered throughout eastern Bosnia. So the issue of genocide denial and triumphalism today in the region is really on a really high level.
Thank you. Melina, what role do media play in addressing the topic of genocide and racism? How important it is?
Yeah, well, maybe, because I'm a journalist, so maybe I think we're more important than we actually are. But I do think that it's very important because for most people are not going to go out of their way to research a genocide. They're just going to know what they see and hear through media. So that's why it needs to be a very concise, focused message with the main points just being repeated over and over again. Just like for me, I always use this example, like I don't know anything about football. If somebody asked me who's the best player, I'd be like Messi. Why? I don't know. I have no idea. But that's just what I kind of heard from the media. So journalists need to focus on like what are the main points about the Bosnian genocide and also other genocides, and then put those main points out there for people to understand them. And like I said before, first of all, it's reduced and then it's depoliticized. And also there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of ignorance in the journalism world itself, because like most people, I don't know how it's in Austria, but in Germany, most journalists don't even know the definition of genocide. It's so crazy when you think about it. Like Germany prides itself on its remembrance culture. And if you ask them, what does genocide even mean? They're going to be like, well, yeah, you know, a lot of killing, which is not true. Genocide, like the main point about genocide is extermination. So you can do it with forced sterilizations. And that's genocide. Like in theory, you can have a genocide where nobody is killed and you can just forcibly sterilize everyone, and that's genocide. And on the other hand, the bombing of Germany in World War II was not a genocide because the aim was to stop the Nazis and not to exterminate the German nation. But they don't understand this. So it's like, it leads to things like, well, you know, 8,000, it's not such a big number. It's not such a huge pile of corpses like we're used to. Where, first of all, I'm like, okay, but it's not 8,000. It's like tens of thousands, because Prijedor and Foča and Srebrenica before, like Srebrenica alone was more than 10,000 people killed when you count from 1992. And also the number doesn't even matter. Like it matters to the people, it doesn't matter scientifically speaking. The intent of extermination matters. And that's why also just one last sentence about the Bosnian genocide, because maybe I didn't explain myself the way I was supposed to. It's not the job of courts to say what's a genocide and what isn't. It's not the job of governments. It's the job of genocide experts and scholars like Hikmet. And he says it's the Bosnian genocide, not just him. Most scholars agree it's the Bosnian genocide, not just the Srebrenica genocide, so we should listen to them. And that's something that journalists should know. And they should also know what genocide denial is. Most journalists think denial is if you say nothing happened there at all. But it's also denial, like we have a lot of times with Serb nationalists who denied their denial, and then they're going to say stuff like, oh, it was a tragedy, but never use the word genocide. And for us, we recognize this, but Germans don't recognize it. And then it's very easy for those nationalists to hide because, well, yeah, I said it's a tragedy.
But how can stories and narrative from the Balkan help combat racism in Europe?
Well, first of all, I'm experiencing...
Sorry, and to grow the educational level,
yeah.
Either by journalists or by the civil population.
Well, I'm experiencing this now with my book, with people who tell me they started to read it because they wanted to know something about anti-Muslim racism, and then like half of the book is the Bosnian genocide. So they were like, oh my God, I didn't know any of this. And that's the thing that we have to achieve, because when you start knowing about the Bosnian genocide, your whole view of Europe, of the world, of the Muslim world and so on turns around. Because there's, at least in Germany, I was shocked when I moved to Germany, they're actually saying, I don't know if Austrians are saying this, but like 75 years of peace in Europe. Yeah. Can you believe it? And then when you ask them about it, they're like, well, yeah, we mean 75 years of peace in the EU. And then I'm like, yeah, but Croatia and Slovenia are also in the EU. And then they're like, well, we mean 75 years of peace in countries that were already in the EU at the time when there was peace. And then you'd notice it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like a club of billionaires, where if you're a billionaire, you're going to get into the club, and then we pretend that the club is what made you a billionaire. So first of all, the whole understanding of EU as a peace project crumbles. Then the whole understanding of Muslims as the bad guys crumbles. Because, and this is very interesting, because I tried with 7 different media outlets in Germany. 7 different media outlets, from Spiegel, Taz, ARD, like all over the ideological spectrum. I wanted to say that Karadzic and Mladic were also convicted of terror for the siege of Sarajevo, which resulted in more than 11,500 people killed. So that was 11,500 people killed through terror. That's a number that no IRA or RAF, you know, the leftists, or ETA or like the IS in Europe, no terror organization in Europe comes even close to that number. So the biggest terrorists in Europe are not Muslims, but white European Christians who killed Muslims. And I just wanted to say this, because that's a fact. 7 different media outlets were like, oh, you know, we got to make your text shorter, and just by coincidence, we're going to make this sentence shorter. We're going to erase this sentence. And it was just like so embarrassing. It's embarrassing that you could feel it's not like somebody from above told them, like their boss told them, oh, we can't let this fact get out. It's just like it clashes with their worldview so much. And I send them like a list of sources, so they can't say anything. But still, it clashes with their worldview so much, they just won't let it get out. They're like, I don't know, she sent me sources, but it can't be true. And then they don't let me publish it.
Dennis, how important is the recognition and understanding of the genocide in today's Western Balkan politics?
I have to say something else first, because there were a lot of very important stuff that Melina said about the 75 years of peace. We all saw it. I mean, the articles that came out after the full-scale invasion. It was very. I think it should be very embarrassing for a lot of journalists, a lot of editors, and I don't remember who the quote was from, but this July we had a conference, an international conference with the World Jewish Congress, and a lot of the things Melina said were also said by some people like Menachem Rosensaft, or people second, third generation of Holocaust victims or even survivors. And what a Polish journalist, a Jewish journalist who was in Sarajevo doing the siege because he felt the need to tell the world what's going on. As a Jew, he felt the need to tell the world what's going on in Bosnia right now. And at the end of his speech, he quoted, and I'm very sorry, I can't remember the name, but he quoted a poet who talked about this promise of never again. And he said, you know, what we meant by never again was that never again should 6 million Jews be killed in Europe during the Second World War. I mean, look at what happened in Bosnia, look at what's happening in Ukraine right now. So I'm asking myself, you know, in the past few years, if this never again was ever really taken seriously. And to your question, I mean, I think this was answered by a lot of stuff that we mentioned today. It's what I believe, and I'll just say these 2 sentences. I mean, what I believe. Everyone is talking about reconciliation when you go to Bosnia. When you go to a conference, an international conference, they're talking about reconciliation. You listen to a panel discussion for 1.5 years, and nobody explained to you what they really mean by reconciliation. And this is what I felt as like an 18-year-old kid who had no clue what's going on. And you sit there and, you know, nobody really explains to you how this works and what they think about it. So I'm not really sure that we have the right definition of what it means in post-conflict societies. But what I believe is that educating, advocating, and distributing facts, the hard facts about what happened, is the best way to work towards reconciliation.
Can I just...
Yes.
I just want to rant about reconciliation, because this is like, I hate this, because reconciliation doesn't exist. I always remember a tweet saying there is no reconciliation between Bosniaks and Serbs, because those Serbs that deny the genocide, they're fascists. There's no reconciliation with fascism. Those Serbs that don't deny it and that are generally like nice people, there's no reconciliation with them because there's no problem. There's nothing to reconcile. So reconciliation doesn't actually exist, and it just stems from this genocide relativization that's like, oh, you know, everyone against everyone, they were all equally bad, blah, blah, so now we need to reconcile them. Us, the civilized West, needs to come down and reconcile these cave people, instead of understanding that there's a greater Serbian ideology that attacked 4 countries, and that's the problem. And the problem in Bosnia is for decades, it's just like we're a poor country, we don't have money to donate to some NGOs, so the NGOs get their money from the EU, from the US. And the EU and the US are like, yeah, let's just bring 15 kids together from different ethnicities and they're going to play football and then we're going to get 10,000 euros for a few kids playing football, and nobody is helped by that. But you make some pictures and you're like, oh, our NGO did something for reconciliation, and then you keep getting money and you keep getting celebrated as a hero. And then someone comes along and just says, no, maybe let's deal with fascism, and then that person's the problem. So I'm sorry, I just want to rant about reconciliation. I just think we need to be more strong, more selbstbewusst, more confident, and be like, yeah, there's nothing radical or nothing extreme or nothing whatever about stating the facts. If somebody has a problem with the facts, they have a problem with themselves because, for example, in my work, I always say Serb nationalists, Serb nationalists, Serb nationalists. I shouldn't have to do this because it's not my job to take care of the image of Serbs, but I always say Serb nationalists instead of just Serbs. And even then I get death threats because obviously people identify with Mladic and Karadzic and Milosevic. So for the nationalists, you can never make them happy. And the people that are not nationalists, they're happy. Like they don't have a problem with facts being stated. So just state the fact.
Thank you. Selma Jahić, how were you and your family received in Austria, and how do you view the role of the Austrian society in addressing this topic today? Do you feel the impact, the positive or the negative?
When we arrived in Austria, I believe Austrian society had probably enough about Balkan refugees and its own. Nobody asked any questions. Like we arrived in August 1995, and beginning of September, I started school with my brother. So we had no time to know anything about Austria. We were just pushed into this new society where we didn't speak the language or anything. So we tried to survive as best as we could. None of my teachers ever asked me what I have survived and what I went through. So I was this little traumatized girl inside of the class. There was this huge cross hanging inside the wall inside of my classroom in a public school. I came from a war zone where Christians were killing Muslims. So this symbol, I don't know, I feared it at the time. So the people who actually helped me over the fear were people who was a pastor from a church who helped us to arrive in Austria. My father was under his wing, kind of. He helped him with his job, to get a job, and the nuns of a church also helped us. So these people, religious people, actually real Christians people, were the ones who cared for us, who tried to help us, not the Austrian society, not the school, not the government, no one, just normal, regular people who saw that we needed them in a sense. Later on, through my school life, no one talked about Bosnian genocide. It was a part of, a little bit a part of the curriculum back when we went through the Holocaust. They wanted me to talk about it, me who was totally traumatized to tell anything about Srebrenica, what I witnessed there. I had this Serbian classmate back then. She was born in Vienna. She said she's from Brčko, from Republika Srpska. She denied that Brčko is always Republika Srpska for her. And she clashed one time with me. I believe I was 16, 17 years old. And we were on the topic of Srebrenica. And we had the break time. And she came to me, she said, you know what? Mladic wasn't so bad. He helped you to get outside. He even provided us you with buses. He was not the bad guy. And I was like, I saw red for a second. In a second, I wanted to spring at her throat and strangle her because of that. So my teacher didn't intervene. No one of them took my side or anything or wanted to talk to her. What she said was wrong. So later on, when I grew older, in my 20s, I started on my own to research more about our genocide, about politics, etc. There was nothing what was taught in schools. And I don't think that Austrian society ever cared about what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Because we as Bosnians here in Austria, we fitted very well into this society. We were not people who stood out in any kind of way. We didn't talk our own about the struggles we went through. I believe most of us who are here in Austria have a history of war, of trauma, what we went through. I believe many here in this room who went through the things that we went through. And most of us never talked about that because it's hard. It's really hard to talk about stuff that was so horrible that you needed years and years and years to talk about it. I have many family members to this day who can't talk about the things that they saw in the woods when they were fleeing. Some of them have witnessed horrible crimes, and to this day they can't talk about it. And that's why we need educated people who are maybe braver than we are, who can take our stand and talk sometimes even for us. And we need to work in Austria regarding that, especially in school.
Thank you. Hikmet Karčić, considering the current rise of the political right in Europe, how do you perceive the resonance and influence of the Bosnian genocide within these movements? When you think about Orban or also in Slovakia, the last elections.
Before I answer that, just to go ahead to what Selma said, there's a concept which I write about in my book, which I call collective traumatization. So the key aspect of the camps was not to kill Bosniaks. The main aspect of the camps was to collectively traumatize the entire Bosniak population, to destroy the fundamentals, the foundations of the Bosniak traditional family. So you have dozens of people who have met who haven't come back to Bosnia or have come back to Bosnia once or twice in the last 30 years. For example, raping a daughter in front of her father or something like that. Similarly to that, public executions in camps statistically are a small number, but psychologically create a long-lasting transgenerational trauma, which scientifically proven is part of our genes. And that's something which we need to know about. So genetically, all of us here who have some sort of experience from the Second World War, from 1992, from 1995, genetically carry trauma inside our genes. That's what I wanted to point out regarding this, what she just mentioned about people not talking about their experiences from the war. Regarding the far right movements and ideologies, the war in Bosnia gave wings to far-right movements in Europe today. This is something which we need to always underline when we talk about far-right groups today. The Golden Dawn in Greece, members of the Golden Dawn took part in the Srebrenica genocide. Russian volunteers took part in Visegrad, in Bosnia, and so on. In the Croat Defense Council, the Croat army, Bosnian Croat army, you had an entire brigade of international soldiers who, for the first time in Europe, after 50 years after the Holocaust, waved Nazi flags, had the Nazi salute, and named their brigades after neo-Ustasha commanders from World War II without any consequences. You had Germans, you had Austrians, you had Americans, you had Finnish people in these brigades. They all came back to their hometowns in Europe, and they still live in Europe today. One of them is even a university professor in Western Europe. You can find them on Facebook. You can find a Swedish guy on Facebook who posted a picture of himself above Jablanica, a town in central Bosnia, saying that he dipped bullets in pig fat to shoot at Muslims in Jablanica. So we're talking about people who are citizens of the European Union, who are paying taxes in Western European countries, who haven't been even called to the police to state what they were doing in Croat formation, neo-Nazi formation in 1982. These men came back to their hometowns. They saw that you can do whatever you want. One of them, Jackie Arklov, a neo-Nazi from Sweden, he started his own neo-Nazi organization in Sweden. He was arrested after killing 2 Swedish policemen. He was freed, of course, of charges of war crimes against Bosniak Muslims in Stolac, but he was convicted for the murder of 2 policemen in Sweden. And today he got the life sentence. He's in a prison there. So that's one aspect of this. So we have the far right people who are just waiting for the right opportunity to go to some country in the margins of Europe, which nobody looks at, have a war, have a fun time there, and come back. None of them, even the Golden Dawn members, haven't been prosecuted or interviewed for what they did. Second thing is the ideology. Radovan Karadzic, Ratko Mladic, Slobodan Milosevic, all the Serb nationalist leaders talked about this great replacement idea, talked about the Muslim threat of migration coming into Europe from the Balkans, talked about the demographic bomb that Bosniaks and Albanians were reproducing too much in the region. And this was part of something which the modern far-right groups, after 9/11, sticked on. So this was around for a long time. I remember a time before 9/11 when this was on some very obscure websites on internet, which nobody read, honestly. After 9/11, after the terrorist attacks in Europe, you had a large increase in people who were finding these kind of theories very interesting and who were sticking to it. So we have this influence of the far right, of the Bosnian genocide on the far right today is something which is visible even among politicians which we have today. For example, Viktor Orban's advisor once accidentally tweeted that during a meeting that the main discussion which they had was how to deal with the issue of 2 million Muslims in Bosnia today. That's the biggest problem for European Muslims. Viktor Orban gives money to Dodik. And right now, in the cab while I was coming to this book talk, I was reading that the EU just gave 13 million euros to Hungary so that they don't veto aid to Ukraine. So what we have is the EU funding Viktor Orban funding Dodik. Dodik creating a problem, and then we are sitting together talking about how to deal with Dodik. You deal with Dodik by taking out him, like taking out Viktor Orban and stopping them from cooperating with each other. So you have this high-level political level cooperation between him, between the AfD, between all the other neo-Nazi and far-right groups throughout Europe. And you also had people like Steve Bannon who came to meet up with Bosnian Serb leaders while he was still the advisor for Donald Trump, or right after he stopped being the advisor. So the Bosnian genocide in Bosnia is still a very, very hot topic and a very interesting topic for the far right. But unfortunately, this is something which we are still ignoring because, maybe it is a problem that there are too many Bosniaks in Bosnia living today. Maybe this is a problem. We don't know. I mean, I'm not the one who should, bring conclusions or whatever. But what we mentioned earlier about genocide denial, in Republika Srpska, this can be solved so quickly, so easily. To be honest, the number of Bosniaks living in Republika Srpska today is under 5%. So statistically, in 10, 15 years' time, you're not going to have a single Bosniak living in Republika Srpska. Because if the situation goes on like this, the old people will die, the young kids will go and move on to Western Europe because people from right now are leaving Sarajevo to come and live in Vienna. So why live in Foča or Visegrad or Srebrenica or Prijedor? And if you can't deal with a small entity, with a small autonomous region which has 800,000 people, this small obscure Republika Srpska, if this is the biggest problem in Europe today, then I have a gut feeling that somebody really needs him to be there to get our nerves out. Because you can get rid of people very easily, very quickly. Just look at what's going on in other countries. So the far right and mainstreaming of far right ideologies and ideas is something which is even more present in Europe today and in North America than we really know and that we really can see in the local public narratives which are out there.
Thank you. There are so many questions, but now I want to start to introduce an interaction. We will now start with the Q&A session. Amir, can you can give your questions to Amir. He will hold the microphone. Oh, can you give him the microphone? Do we have questions from the audience?
Well, it doesn't work. I have a question for Professor Karčić. When speaking about the term of Bosnia genocide, I think that our society now really established good fundament for cultural memory when it comes to Srebrenica genocide. But when we speak about Bosnia genocide, how much can we expect in the future to institutionalize that collective memory? I mean, maybe it's not a good comparison to compare Bosnian genocide with Holocaust, but we can see how Jews interpreted Holocaust in aftermath of the World War II. And I think actually that now when you enter Israel on the airport, you cannot enter the country before you have a tour on the Holocaust Museum. They have a lot of studies, institutes for research and similar when it comes to Holocaust. Can we expect something like that in the future when it comes to Bosnian genocide? For example, why don't we establish a gender studies department at the political faculty at the University of Sarajevo? Why don't we establish an institute for research on Bosnian genocide, not just genocide in Srebrenica? Can we expect something like that in the recent future?
Thank you.
So people who know me better say that I'm a pessimist and that I tend to be very critical towards Bosniaks. And since I'm a Bosniak, I like to be very critical towards Bosniak because I don't buy that story that every time somebody else is guilty. Sometimes we are guilty as well. In most cases, we are. There is an institute for the study of research of war crimes. I work there. The problem is, out of 10 people working there, I'm the only guy writing in English. So that's one thing. Second thing is that post-war corruption and post-war employment wasn't really strategically done well. Let me give you a case. In Gorazde, I don't know if anybody here is from Gorazde. In Gorazde, Gorazde is part of the federation. So no Milorad Dodik, no Čović, all Bosniaks. The cantonal prosecution office in the last 30 years has not issued a single indictment for war crimes in Gorazde. And Gorazde went through hell. 150 kids killed, notorious shelling, siege, everything. The problem was that the Ministry of Interior didn't have anybody dealing with war crimes inside a war crimes investigator. Because the man who would be dealing with war crimes was usually dealing with drug abuse and things like that. So what they do is, after a lot of pressure from one of my friends who is from that region, he pressures the local government to put in the whole, this Bosnian bureaucracy is even worse than German and Austrian bureaucracy. You have to have this whole set of laws in order to have one workplace opened up. And instead of employing somebody who's really going to do a job, they employ the cousin of a cousin of a cousin, who is right now getting money and a salary for war crimes and still isn't doing anything in the last 3 years. So there's that aspect as well. So we do have an institute which has quite some good books actually published. We recently published, not because I'm one of the co-authors, but we recently published a book called Nastanak Republike Srpske, or The Establishment of Republika Srpska. So that's like the latest book we had. And another colleague wrote a book about Jajce in 1992. So there is a lot of stuff written. The problem is, if you don't write in English, if you get it published in Bosnian, if you can buy it only at 5 places in Sarajevo, you don't get it in the public. And that's what I wanted to tell you guys. Don't buy this book. This book is open access. You can download it as a PDF. I didn't write the Vampire Diaries or Harry Potter. I'm not going to make money out of this. Get your universities to buy this book. This book is quite expensive. It's $80. Don't buy it. It's open access. The university made it open access because it's an important topic for them. So you can download, you can use it, and people are already using it in their universities. But get your faculties, your libraries to buy these books. We don't have many books written by Bosniaks about the Bosnian genocide. There's Edina Bećirević. There's me. This took like 10 years for that to be written. And the latest book, which is about Bosniaks, is by Jasmin Mojanović. So 3-4 people writing in English about Bosniaks, about post-genocide and so on. So there's a lot of stuff written, there's a lot of stuff being done. Unfortunately, it is all up to the personal enthusiasm of people. Just like in every workplace. Like, I mean, honestly, we're a very small nation, 1.7 million maybe right now living in Bosnia. Not everybody does their work very well. Not only everybody wants to work that well, how work ethics are in Bosnia. So even for this topic, you really need to be, either have a very good will to work with this, or as Emir Selgić, our dear friend, says, you need to have a family member lost in the genocide to work on this, if you want to work on this very well. So if you want to have the will to work on this, and this is crazy, working on these topics, it's psychologically really bad, honestly. So not many people would rather write about EU integration of Croatia and their legal whatever symphony of laws, or I don't know, whatever, and then or some of my historian friends, they write about the migration of Chobans, these people in the mountains in the 17th century, with their sheep from one area to the other. Because this is stuff, even if you do make a mistake, nobody cares. Here, if I made a mistake and I had to really go through each and every name, because if you make a mistake, and the first thing the Bosniaks do when they read a book is they try to find a mistake. So if you spell their surname wrong, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to call me and say, how dare did you write this instead of this? So that's the other aspect you have, working with topics with people who are still alive. So it's a very complex topic. There are people working on it, but we need to have young Bosnians who are going to write about this in German, French, English, and so on and so forth. If you write about this only in Bosnian, nobody's going to know about it.
So, other questions? I have some.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for pointing out the most important things about Bosnian genocide, but I don't have any question. I just want to point out a few things so that we can broaden our discussion a little bit. So I saw that we somehow managed to skip the involvement of also Serbian and Croatian government inside the whole war in Bosnia. We also know that Croatia was also part of ethnic cleansing and concentration camps, and people from the western part of Bosnia also suffered a lot. And also one more important thing, which reflects right now on entire societies around the Balkans, is the involvement of religious communities in doing the war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. To be precise, I just want to point out the responsibility of Serbian Orthodox Church during these crimes that happened all around Bosnia, because they were the ones who were behind unofficially supporting, and they motivated politicians and soldiers to commit those war crimes as some kind of holy war. So maybe we should reflect that on modern day, like 2023, and how is it possible to fight the negation of genocide in our societies if we have some religious organizations who are still supporting and negating that, and we know that most of the Balkan population is still religious and conservative in some sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for pointing this out. This is very important to me. So for me, it's like the basic fact. Why did the war start? It was a war of aggression by first Serbia, a year later by Croatia. to create Greater Serbia and Greater Croatia. That for me is like the one sentence summary of the war of aggression against Bosnia. So that's why we didn't mention it, because I thought like that's the basics, but thank you for again pointing out the basics. So it was not a Bürgerkrieg. If somebody tells you that, they're just, first of all, they have no idea what they're talking about, and second of all, they're taking Milosevic, they're protecting Milosevic, whether they want to or not.
Thank you. The next question. I would suggest that we collect the questions. Do we have one question here? And also a statement from Omar.
Kids, can you hear me? So first of all, thank you for this interesting and intense discussion. So I'm a Kosovo-Albanian political science student here in Austria, in Vienna, and my interest lies also on the Western Balkans. My question would be, how can remembering the past contribute to building a more just and peaceful future in Bosnia and Herzegovina? So what can we learn about the past, and how can we transform this, let's say, tragic story into what more beautiful thing in the future?
Thank you. Would you answer? Who wants to answer?
I think we should learn that from you, because I think Albanians are doing so many things right and correctly. So I think first thing is Bosniaks should learn from Albanians how to be more unified, how to have more confidence, how to not put themselves down. And then once we learn from Albanians and steal all your ideas, then it's going to be good.
Omar Al-Rawi. Do we have questions?
First of all, really congratulations for this fantastic what I heard of you, and I really didn't regret coming here, because it's really... First of all, I just want to say, as my name is Omar Al-Rawi, I'm a member of the City Council of Iraqi origin, and I was all the time very connected to the Bosnian community since the 90s, where the churches were taking care, not only the churches, but also other Muslim people in Vienna. And I just want to say that we should all learn from the Bosnians how they succeeded in the documentation what happened. Nobody in the Muslim world had succeeded to do this. So really, so congratulations. So you could now tell a lot of what went wrong, but that's what you're doing is really fantastic. Nobody managed to do this. What I want to say is, it's a very big mistake if we think, because you mentioned now Kosovo and how we could learn from Kosovo. I think it would be a very, very big mistake if we think that it's a national or ethnic conflict. Yeah? Adelheid Wölfel, she's a very good journalist who really made a lot of writing about what happened in Bosnia, and she said it started with the demonization of Muslim names, for example. Trying to figure out. It was at the end, and I'm really very glad that you said it, Melissa, that also underlining it's an anti-Muslim hatred in Islamophobic case. And it would be a very big mistake if that would be figured out and said, no, it's a national thing, and that's the reason what happened. And I saw it a lot in the discussion when there is an Islamophobic debate in Europe. Sometimes some Bosnians say, well, we are the Euro-Islam, we're the European ones, we are the so-called the better Muslims. You couldn't give us in the same basket with the rest. This mistake shouldn't happen. And what I really awfully see that there's no solidarity. I take part in every Srebrenica march, what happens, and I see some not Bosnians gathering, but they're not a lot, yeah? Those who walk are Bosnians. On the other hand, when there is something concerning the Syrians, so there are more Syrians there, very, very little, maybe non-Bosnians. If there's something with Palestinians, and so you can carry out. So I think one of the most important things is to act solidarity, because that what happened is not just a Bosnian terrible thing. It was that concerns the whole humanity, and some. I think that someone who is not able to act solidarity with the others, can't accept that the others will act also solidarity with you. And I think this is the statement that I want to give today in dealing with this situation. And really, it's I was once said it's this Wunde will never heal. So I don't know how to say it in English. Will never heal. But even if it heals, it will stay an arb there. And this should always remember us what happened and keep it on to tell it to the next generations. And I think that the Bosnian community or those who work for that really succeeded a lot. Nobody else in the other Orientalic countries have ever made such a total documentation and scientific research. We're just talking about, yeah, it happened, yeah. But what happened exactly, nobody has done it. So congratulations for that.
So I need to.
Answer, yeah?
Yes, I have to. I beg to differ, honestly, because I worked on this in my book. Actually, that's something which you oftenly hear, that this was a conflict between Christians and Muslims. That this was a clash of civilizations. That this was everything else. Do you know why Bosniaks were tortured to that extent? Look, Bosniaks weren't good Muslims, honestly. In late 1980s. I come from a Muslim family, so I can say this very... My dad remembers my late father in Begova Jamia, all those who are from Bosnia, the main mosque in Sarajevo. In 1979, you had 8 people inside. For Juma, maybe double that. If the Serbs didn't commit genocide, if they left it like that for the next 40 years, you wouldn't have Muslims there today. So they could have gotten rid of us without killing us. If the Serbs came and said, okay, we'll give you 48 hours to leave, do you not think anybody would have left? Everybody would have left. Sarajevo, the whole of Sarajevo would have left. The whole of Srebrenica would have left. Nobody would be there to defend the towns. Secondly, that's one thing. Secondly, at the same time, you had Croatian POWs, Croatian civilians and soldiers who were captured by the Serbs, who were treated very well. Just like, if you look right now, the Russians and Ukrainians, you don't see many cases of people being beaten up, and sexually abused and camped by, the men and so on. Here you had men who were raped and sexually abused inside these places. Thirdly, the Muslim world the Muslim communities in the world work in solidarity with Bosniaks. The Muslim states, not so much. Gaddafi supporting Milosevic, Saddam Hussein supporting Milosevic, Yasser Arafat supporting Milosevic. Yasser Arafat in 1999, during the height of the NATO bombardment of Serbia, invites Milosevic to come to Bethlehem to celebrate Christmas. This was 3 years after Srebrenica. The leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization invites the biggest mass murderer of Muslims in Europe to come and celebrate Christmas in Bethlehem. And you know what happens next? Unbelievable. The Israelis say, if you land in Israel, we will arrest you, because there was a warrant for him at the ICTY, and he doesn't go. This is 1999. This was 4 years after the mass graves of being already dug up. Do you know the reason why the Serb perpetrators were so brutal towards the Bosniaks? In order to know this, I went through it in my book. Bosniaks are considered to be poturice, Turkifiers, people who became Turks. So the Serb nationals believe that all of us here, our ancestors 500 years ago were Orthodox Christians. The Ottomans came to Bosnia in 1465, and our ancestors were so sleazy, so greedy that they converted to Islam so that they can become part of the great state. Why? Because we had such weak Orthodox Christian genes, so that we were genetically weak, so we converted to Islam. So in 1992, a man in Prijedor takes revenge on his best man because of this. He could have just shot him, but no, he cuts off his testicles in the camp. He does this in front of people. The level of brutality which was committed during the Bosnian genocide was so high, higher than in other genocides in the world. They could have gotten rid of us very easily, put on a train, put on a bus, and so on. No, they wanted to slowly inflict such psychological pain that people who came here in 1996, 1997 would never want to return back to Srebrenica, to Prijedor, to Visegrad, and so on. Narrowing this down to a religious conflict is a big mistake. Let me tell you why. Firstly, out of everything which I said. Secondly, the Bosnian army had many non-Muslims there. And if you also want to be very brutally honest, the Serbian army also had many people who had Muslim names. Maybe many people don't know this, but there were a lot of Muslims who were part of the Bosnian Serb army. I have lists of them from Trebinje, from Bijeljina, and so on, who are right now on Facebook. You can find them. I Googled them, find them on Facebook. They're living there. They're part of the Jamaats and so on today. They were members of the Bosnian Serb army. So this wasn't clearly a Muslim-Christian fight.
Just to clarify, I never said it.
No, I know. No, I was just connecting with your question because there are, I mean, look, the post-war, post 9/11 and the whole that time area, Bosnia was always mentioned as an area where Muslims had to be protected of some sort. I was just connecting with your question. I didn't say that you were, but the main question the main thing we need to know here is that the people the reason why Sarajevo and Bosnia survived wasn't because of the international community, wasn't because of the Muslim world, wasn't because of any Muslim solidarity. The reason why Bosnia survived was because in 1982 you had a couple of hundred crazy Bosnians who decided to give it all or die and step up to tanks in Sarajevo, Srebrenica, Kalesija, Tuzla, and so on. And wherever there was no resistance, you had massacres. Wherever you had resistance, that's where the Serbs stopped. So the Bosnian army was the main force which stopped the genocidal campaign. If it wasn't for the Bosnian, if we Bosnians hadn't armed ourselves in 1992, we wouldn't be sitting here today. We would be probably sitting somewhere in, maybe in some part of Anatolia where they plan to send us, in southern Turkey, working in five-star resorts as waiters and cooks, because that was the plan of the Serbs, to send us to Anatolia where we belong, or maybe to kill us. So that's why I always need to emphasize this. This was not a religious conflict. The religion was a main aspect of it. This was a huge aspect of it. But at the same time, even today, the largest numbers of countries, and we have a Kosovar here, the largest number of countries which did not recognize Kosovo are Muslim countries, right? So, the thing isn't really black and white. We really need to go more deeper into it, and we need to see why certain Muslim countries still want to support Vučić, not talk about the Uyghurs right now in China, and many other things. So that's what I wanted to point out.
Yeah, but vice versa also.
Same thing.
Kosovo was a member in the Istanbul Conference.
Yeah, just maybe to add to that. Just maybe to add to that, I agree it wasn't a religious thing, but it was seen from outside so many times as a religious thing, or even if the war itself and the genocide itself wasn't seen as a religious thing, there was still hatred for the Bosniaks because they're Muslim. So, for example, Mitterrand said he won't help Bosnia, he won't end the arms embargo because it would be unnatural to have a Muslim country in Europe. Or British diplomats said the genocide is a necessary restoration of Christian Europe, and so on and so on. So that's why I always say, you would never say, if somebody said, I know Stefan, he is a Holocaust denier, but he's not an anti-Semite. Everybody would think that's ridiculous. Of course, if he denies the Holocaust, of course, he's anti-Semitic. And that's why it's also important to understand if somebody denies the Bosnian genocide, denies the genocide against Uyghurs and all those other things, even though they are not completely religiously motivated. You know, I could go to China, nothing would happen to me, even though I'm Muslim. But still, they have this element. So we have to recognize, just like it's anti-Semitic to deny the Holocaust, it's anti-Muslim racism to deny the Bosnian genocide, the Uyghur genocide, and so on. So that's why I'm always angry when something happens. Some German news outlet again denies the genocide in Bosnia, not because they want to, but because they're just idiots. And then it's just Bosniaks fighting it. Where are all the, Union of Muslim students, Union of Muslim this, Muslim that, anti-racist this, anti-racist that? Nobody recognizes that the fight against the genocide in Bosnia and the fight against the genocide against Uyghurs and against Rohingya and so on, it's their fights as well. They don't recognize it.
Thank you. You can hold it. Kabir?
Just a quick follow-up question, because I'm not sure if I understood what you said, because you said it's not a religious conflict. It was not a religious conflict, but you mentioned that the reason was because they changed the religion. So it's a religious argument, isn't it? From the perspective of the Serbs, of this nationalist, fanatic Serbs and Croatians, the Muslims, the Bosniaks, were actually just Croats and Serbs that changed the religion, right? So in their perspective, it was a religious conflict, or not? Or maybe you could classify more.
If it's a religious conflict, then you hate all Muslims or all Christians or all. But if you hate selectively, then it's not.
To specificate, can we compare that with race anti-Semitism, where the recognition or the classification as a Jew is not a measure of how religious a person is? So, and also by the Muslims in 1992 or during the Bosnian genocide, was the religious the religion, the act of this, was that the measure, or was that something like race Islamophobia or race anti-Muslim racism?
If you wanted to survive, you could survive by converting back to Christianity, to Orthodoxy. And people who converted back to Orthodoxy survived, like in Bielna. But those who didn't, of course, this is temporary conversions. But again, this is not a religious thing. If you had a Pakistani, of course, but this is. I know. I mean, I wrote it in my book. You can read it there. It is an important segment. But then you had cases in Prijedor where people would come and kill you because your great grandfather was a Ustasha, not because you were a Muslim. You were a Muslim along the way, but you were an Ustasha. Then what do we say about that? So there are cases. This wasn't, again, I underline this. Why do I underline this? Because we always fall into this trap of, this is exactly what the Serb nationalists want. They want to show that people in Bosnia cannot coexist. But the fact that you have Sarajevo as it is, historically, that shows that different religions can coexist. And that only people like these fascists from the 1990s and 1940s, they're the ones who try to polarize the society in that aspect. And they're trying to show us as conflicted tribes which cannot live together. And that's something which I always fight against, because, of course, I totally disagree with Bosniaks who come and say that we are very special because we have a Euro-Islam and so on. That's nothing. That's, that's something else, but it's not true. But our experience of living in Europe is something which other migrant communities don't have. Like the issue of halal food in military, we solved it in 1913. Austria sold it in 2015, 14. I don't know. No, sorry, Germany, Norway, and so on. So we solved many issues back during the Austro-Hungarian time, and it's something which we can't deny. Our institutional level of Islamic administration is something which we also have, which isn't possible and available in other different communities. So we had something which was specific, and that's why I also don't use the term Islamophobia, because Islamophobia means that you're afraid of Islam. Once when we were having a training by the OSCE for fighting against Islamophobia, one of the trainers told us that we need to organize a football match with police officers. So I told him, yeah, sure, let's go to Ahmići in Vitez and organize a football match between the survivors of the Ahmići massacres with the Croat policemen who murdered them. Because the fact of the matter was, the Croat and Serb perpetrators in the genocide knew exactly what a mihrab was, what a Quran was, what the Sunnah was, what baklava was. They knew everything about it. And nevertheless, they were still brutally murdered. Not to the mere fact that they were Muslims. Do you know why? Another example, Syrian refugees in Belgrade, 2013-14. There's this news I watched on Al Jazeera. Beautiful story. People making iftar for Syrian refugees. Do you know what happened with Bosniak refugees in Belgrade in 1992? Take a guess. Or in Podgorica. That's what I'm saying. It's not the same thing. They were deported, they were executed, they were thrown into the Danube, they were thrown into the Drina. They ended up in mass graves, and we're still looking for them. So it's not the same thing, you know. If you belong to the image of a Muslim, the Syrians there, then you make iftar for them. But if Dennis comes as a refugee in 1992 in Belgrade, that's when they kick you out of the country. So there is.
Yeah, but what would happen in 2092 if the Syrians had iftar in Belgrade? So the comparison
No.
is not the same.
Do you know how many Palestinian students lived in Belgrade in 1992? Come on. You know Belgrade was a
We
place.
recognize that we have many to discuss. At this point, we have to end. It's really late. Thank you for the active participation. We have drinks there outside. You can still be there, discuss something, or speak together.
I just want to say everybody should follow him on Twitter, please. That's the most important thing you should do if you want to.
Thank you.
Download it for free. You can download it for free.
So Kabir wants to say something.
Sorry, I know you just ended the session, but I'd just like to have one advice from you all. Because we have many people here sitting that are working in the public sector. So maybe you could advise us and them what they should do. Yeah.
Listen to people like Hikmet.
Yeah.
Listen to his colleagues that he... And I joked around. I mean, he mentioned one book that they wrote about the Republika Srpska. And the last time I saw him... let's say the last time I saw him in Sarajevo, he was presenting a book about intercepted phone calls right before the war that he co-authored with two colleagues as well. So, like Melina said, follow them on Twitter, follow what they're working on, what they're doing, because there are many books that are still going to be written and many articles, many academic research papers. So, and Hikmet definitely, and all of his colleagues from Sarajevo are one of the people to listen to, as well as Selma Jahić as a survivor. I mean, we have this very unique, rare situation where we have an institution in like the Srebrenica Memorial Center where everyone working there, 70 people working there, who are either survivors of the genocide or family members of people who were killed, or family members of people who survived. And I still don't understand why we have academic, intellectual discussions or whatever, where we talk about a genocide without having the people who actually survived on a panel. So this is a very touchy topic for me, and you won't have me as a friend if I hear about anyone organizing such an event, because I mean, go to any country in the world and you will find somebody who was in Bosnia in the 90s or came out of Bosnia after the war, after 95. So come on, guys.
Thank you, Melina.
Yeah, like I said, just follow him on Twitter. Everything, like you will see a new world. And also look at who he retweets, then follow them.
What actions, I mean, sorry, I don't want to break this, but what actions do you expect from lawmakers? I mean, it's surely not enough to just be informed.
Yeah, well,
but you surely expect them to do something, because they are the people that can change something in the society, aren't they?
I think, what do I expect them to do? I don't expect them to do anything. I've lost all of my optimism. I think it's just going downhill and it's getting worse. So I don't expect them to do anything. What I wish they would do is first stop the appeasement politics against Serbia. We've seen that this doesn't work. We've seen it with Putin. We know that Vučić is basically a Putin wannabe. We know that the ideology is like almost copy-paste. And like we know that this doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like the way it's going, it's like Vučić or Dodik demands everything. And then the West is like, oh, please, please, not everything. And then they're like, okay, 90%. And then the West is like, oh my God, such a nice compromise. Like, just stop giving in to them. Stop this appeasement policies. Realize, this is why I said it's such a big problem when reporting on the genocide is depoliticized. Imagine if we had decades of reporting about the Holocaust and nobody even knew what NSDAP means. Imagine this. And nobody knows what SDS is. Like, I mean, not nobody, we know, but like in the German and Austrian society, nobody knows SDS. Nobody knows that SDS, who is like the party that organized the genocide logistically, of course with Milosevic, like they are now in many, many areas the less radical option, because Dodik is even worse. Now imagine what situation we are in. And imagine, I have a Serb friend from Republika Srpska who said, I can't vote there because either, like, if I want to have any chance of voting Dodik away, I have to vote for the second biggest option, which is SDS, Karadzic's party. I can't do it. So this is what people have to recognize. The problem is not uncivilized Balkanese people killing each other. The problem is Greater Serbia and this ideology, and Greater Croatia and that ideology. Those are the problems. That's what they need to recognize. That's what they need to work on. And get over this, oh no, but these other people, they're Muslims, so we can't really agree with them and we can't really support them. Get over it. You're going to have Ukraine #2. I mean, it's like you said, the far-right ties are so many. Like the guy that shot down the Dutch plane going to Malaysia, he was in Srebrenica during the genocide, Igor Girkin. And nobody punished him for anything, so he was in Srebrenica, unpunished, then he went to Chechnya, unpunished, then he went to Syria, unpunished, then he went to Ukraine, and that went unpunished until last year. So, like, the deaths of Bosniaks turn into the deaths of people all around the world through far-right terrorism. And it's only when it's far-right terrorism that people start to care. They don't care about more than 100,000 people killed in Bosnia or more than 13,000 people killed in Kosovo. They care about the 2 Germans killed in Halle, and the guy who did it also referenced the Bosnian genocide. And that's such a tragedy. Sorry, that rant went.
Thank you, Hikmet.
2 or 3 things. Firstly, support Ukraine. Send arms to Ukraine. Europe is currently defended in Ukraine. Bosnia is defended in Ukraine. If Ukraine fell in 21? I forgot. Bosnia would have been attacked as well. This is, I mean, we knew all this. There were a lot of arms shipments. There was a lot of people were ready to run away from Brčko in November 2021 and so on. So. No appeasement. Don't send helmets to Ukraine. Send them, really good stuff. Don't be like the Germans. Secondly, freeze all bank accounts and property of RS politicians in Austria. Don't let a single euro go into Republika Srpska if they're acting like this. Put them under sanctions. And don't invest in the sewage. Don't invest in the facade of a school unless the local politician or the local member of parliament acts differently. Because if you keep on giving them money, they're going to continue this way. And thirdly, for the local educational system, there's a really great resource book which I was one of the co-authors with several other experts from Bosnia. We wrote the handbook for the Bosnian genocide. a very small book. People don't like to read big books. So this is very small, 50 pages. A handbook for the Bosnian genocide. So translated into German for German teachers, journalists, whatever else. And if you ever need information about Bosnia, they said follow me on Twitter. You can also give me a phone call, whatever. I'll be very happy to give you that info. Thanks.
Thank you, Hikmet. Selma?
So for my part, I'm like to focus a little bit on the education system here in Austria. We have the unique opportunity because many generations post-Balkan, post-Bosnian war, post-invasion of Bosnia are living here. So people who are younger than me, like Dennis, who grew up here, and people who are now kids of my brother and other who survived genocide are living here in a multi-ethnic community. So we have the chance here to educate them correctly. They don't have the chance in Bosnia and Herzegovina right now. There are different stories told all around the area. So we can here start to educate them, for them maybe to educate people on the Balkans, to reach their friends, family members, communities there, to re-educate them, to let them know what they've learned, to make maybe exchanges inside these little communities. So we can start here. There's little steps. Every teacher in school can be that person to make a person thinking differently about the things that maybe they've heard at home. We know that most of us learned history in Bosnia and Herzegovina from home. Our parents told us what had happened, not an educated teacher with facts. So it's more emotional. They killed them, they killed them. It's like maybe a gossip in a sense. So you have no facts there. So if you have a correct education system here, similar how we do with the Holocaust, in combination with that, it's a great opportunity. If you teach Holocaust, you can parallelly with that as a base teach also genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That could work very well if you teach them correctly. So we can use that opportunity to educate younger people to be better than we were back then.
Thank you. As a teacher, I will follow your advice. And finally, last but not least, my advice. Your biggest weapon is your vote, is your free opinion. And you have the opportunity to visit such evenings, such manifestations, and to get in touch with other progressive people, to speak together and to make the world a better place. Thank you.